Does the snare drum matter? Let's get to it. This is a very heated, delicate debate, and I want to talk about it. I've seen several videos, long form and short, suggesting that it doesn't matter. A drum is a drum is a drum. Suggesting that it doesn't matter if it's wood or metal, aluminum, brass, copper, chrome plated, die cast hoops, triple flanged hoops, Slingerlands, stick saver hoops, wooden hoops, suggesting all of that stuff in the long run really doesn't matter. And the argument, and almost all of them that I see, all of the ones worth watching, the argument is the blind test. The argument is, if I play a drum, will you be able to tell me if it's metal, wood, with die-cast hoops, triple flanged hoops, stick saver hoops, what kind of heads? Will you be able to tell me what I'm playing without looking at it? That's the argument. And because it's very hard to identify snare drums on a blind test, the person using this argument thinks that that's the reason why it doesn't matter. That couldn't be further from the truth. It's just wrong. And it's kind of insulting the industry and the engineers and the drum builders to suggest that it doesn't matter. Every company has explored intensely the ingredients that go into making great drums, snare drums as well. If it didn't matter, the second argument is, it's not such an argument, but it's after, quote unquote, having proven that it doesn't matter because you don't know what snare drum that is in a blind test, then the argument then goes on to a moral lesson of, well, it's your responsibility to tune that drum right, to play that drum right, to control perhaps your materialistic point of view of buying drums, you know. In other words, you know, controlling yourself from buying the gold-plated one when you don't really need it to be gold-plated. That's the exception. And there are a lot of people living in that world of the exceptions. And they're using arguments. I mean, this is across all different subjects. They're basing everything they're saying on the exceptions. We're not talking about that today. I'm not talking about that today. I never use that as a way to run my life. I got so much I want to say about this. It's hard for me to just sit and logically go through the conversation because there are so many aspects about a snare drum, about a drum in general, that make a difference. We're talking about, I mean, if we're not even talking about snare drums, just the drums themselves. um, how much material is on the drum that's going to inhibit the vibrations when you play the drum versus a drum that is floating versus a drum that has rubber gaskets or not, versus a drum that has a 45-degree angle bearing edge or a baseball bat bearing edge, versus a drum that has die-cast hoops or wooden hoops. I mean, there are so many things, not even talking about the heads and the sticks, that contribute to the sound of the drum. Not even talking about the other fundamental conversation of how you play the drum. We're not even going to go down that road, because that is the art of drumming. How you deal with all of these ingredients. But to say that it doesn't matter because in a blind test you don't know what drum that is, no, that's wrong. It does matter, and I'm going to prove it. If you saw one of my previous videos, I was talking about a Slingerland 140 model snare drum. Came out in the late 60s. It's a beautiful drum. And my recollection of it being just a wonderful drum for all of the music that I'm playing right now in this band I'm with, playing a cover band with working on our originals, but it's cover music from 90s and before. And so I had mentioned in that video, I suggest to check out that video. It's a wonderful story, and it's very informative of the Slingerland 140 model, and I also play it in the video. I'm not going to be doing any of that today. Sorry. We're just going to be talking about this. So my recollection of that drum being just a wonderful drum blending in with everything that I was playing, I restored it and pulled it out and wanted to see again. And that was about 10 years ago, I guess, more than that. You know, would it live up to my recollection of it? And man, it blew the roof off the pub where we play. I don't mean it was loud. I mean, it blended with all of the songs we played at a phenomenal level. And people were coming back and saying, I hear the difference between this drum and my brass drum that I was using for about a year. But that's not even how I'm going to prove to you that the material does matter. The heads do matter. The rims do matter. The size does matter. All of that does matter. Whether it's metal or wood does matter. When you lock into a pocket occurs not by yourself. A pocket occurs from an interaction. Either something in your mind, in your ear, there's an interaction there, which is a lot harder because you have to do both. But a pocket occurs with interaction, and when you're playing with people, that interaction equates to very small nuances. And these small nuances are what makes up the difference between all of these drums. They add up. But that's not even how I'm going to prove this. The blind test is a ridiculous argument to me. And let's talk about that first. I can take roughly the same size drum, 5.5 by 14, 6.5 by 14, 3.5 by 14, maybe. But let's say 5.5 by 14 or 5 by 14 of a metal drum, a snare drum, and then let's have a variety of bearing edges and a variety of heads and a variety of materials: metal, brass, copper, steel, aluminum, chromed or not, wood, mahogany, oak, poplar, maple, birch, and then all the different variations of the lugs, whether there's a rubber gasket or not, all that stuff. Die-cast hoops, triple flanged hoops, stick-saver hoops, and let's say I'm using the same stick. I'll give you that. There is the possibility of finding the same sound roughly, but very close to all the other drums in that list. You can do that. You can find the same sound between an aluminum snare and a brass snare and a wood snare in all of those variations. You can get very close to having the same sound. Yes, I will give you that. Yes, you can. But that's not the reason why those materials don't matter. Yes, I might be able to get a Superphonic snare drum sound out of my Red Badge vintage Tama snare drum, or my Premier 1026 snare drum, or my vintage Pearl steel snare drum. Yes, I might be able to do that. But I can achieve that sound far easier and far faster and maintain that sound if I get the Superphonic snare drum. That's the difference. Now, what does that mean? Every drum that you have has its character, its identity, has its own essence that it achieves easily, peacefully. Through the tunings, you get its sound very fast. So, in other words, if I'm going to count them right here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 11 snare drums, 12 snare drums. If I take all of those drums, they're all different sizes. If I take all of those drums and tune the heads to their lowest note, which is what I like to do, they will all sound different. All of them. And they will all have a different character on their own. And I didn't have to sit here with a tuner and go through an intense tuning session to get its sound. The sound that it achieves easily, peacefully. That, when you do that, you hear what the drum sounds like, what it wants to sound like. It's kind of what I'm saying. Each drum wants to sound a certain way. So yes, I can take my Acrolite and tighten the heads, maybe get a different head, maybe a different bottom head, maybe, do some modifications in the tunings to get it to sound like a superphonic. Yes, maybe. But that's not the point. That's, yes, you can mold your drum into another one, fine. But it's going to be hard to do that. And you're going to go against the natural characteristics of what that drum was all about. That's the point. So when you get into, buying drums, trying different drums on different recordings, you don't want to spend time racking your brain how to get John Bonham sound out of a piccolo snare drum, right? That's going to drive you nuts. I mean, it's not that you can't do it, and maybe on a blind test you can't tell the difference, but that's not the proof that they don't matter. The proof that they don't matter, the proof that they matter is that it's very hard to get a superphonic sound out of let's say an aluminum drum or a piccolo snare drum, or a drum that has a different depth, a drum that only has 6 lugs. It's very hard to do that. Yes, you can do it, but do you want to struggle that much? The reason why we have different drums, the reason why we have different sizes, the reason why we have different lug mechanisms, different shell constructions, different bearing edges, is because the drums are designed to achieve a sound easily. If you want a deep sound, you don't try and figure out how to get it on a 5.5 by 14. If you want a deep sound, you go for a deep drum. If you want a piccolo sound, 3.5 by 14, you don't try and rack your head apart on a drum that's 6.5 by 14. If you want a steel 1026 Premier sound, you don't just rip your hair out trying to get it on a Pearl Export snare drum. That's not what this is all about. These drums are designed, they're engineered, they're constructed to achieve a sound easily. That's why some people say, wow, these drums, this snare drum, I can get that sound like that. It's so nice. Just put the heads on, tighten it up, boom, there it is. I got my sound. That's what we want. That's why it's important. Yes, you can trick me and in a blind test and make me think that it's a superphonic when it's actually a vintage pearl metal snare drum, fine. You can trick me, go ahead. But I'm not interested in that in the studio. I'm not interested in that in the gig. The last thing I want is to try and force my drum into another area. No, that's a waste of time. And it frustrates you. It's the last thing you want to do. Can you do it? Yes, you can do it. But like I said, if you do that, first of all, you're tuning the drum in a way that it doesn't want to be tuned, and you're losing the quality of the drum's inherent sound. If I have a wooden drum, I have a Rogers here, custom one, made with vintage Keller wood. I customized a Big R. I didn't do that drum to get a John Bonham sound. I want to hear what the essence of those Keller shells sound like. That's what I wanted. Not to just have a drum as a drum as a drum and then make it sound like anything. No, I wanted to hear the essence of it. When I made my 15-inch by, it's got to be maybe 10, 15-inch by 10 brass custom snare drum, I wasn't trying to recreate or force it into a Bonham sound. I wanted to hear its sound without effort. Without effort. I put heads on. I chose a dot. Figured I needed that. But tightened it up like I normally tighten up all my drums. And what does it sound like? Like that. Just easy peasy. I wanted to hear its soul. Yes, I could force it into a Bonham world, but is that what these people are talking about? That's like, what do you do? You don't use that mentality with other stuff. You don't try and make tomato sauce a cream sauce, or that's like trying to mix a deep snare with a piccolo snare. You don't do that. Let me get something that's a little bit more nuanced. You don't try and make an orange taste like a mandarin or a clementine, right? If you want a clementine, you just get that one. So that's, the nature of, and the beauty, incidentally, of the art form. The instruments have an intended direction of sound and of projection and of timbre and of nuance, that they all have different hearts to them, different souls to them. And it's far easier to accept that, to learn about it. It's a beautiful thing to learn about, which is what all people that go into drum crafting, the craft of making drums, are heavily involved in this. Why are we going to do a maple drum versus a birch drum versus a steel drum versus an aluminum, then chrome plated? Why are we going to do all that? Because they recognize that there's an essence to all of these materials, and yes, you can force it to sound like another one in a blind test, but what's the essence of that drum without all of that extra effort? That's what it's all about. That's responsible. Identifying the differences and the essence, that's what makes it beautiful. If I'm wrong, why is it standard practice? You should already have been convinced. But anyway, why is it standard practice to hear phenomenal drummers that have unbelievable experience with all different kinds of music, with all different kinds of recording sessions, with all different kinds of engineers and studio spaces, why do they typically come with several different drums? Snare drums. Why is that heard of again and again and again? Because each drum has its essence. Each material used has its sound that's easily achievable. So if you're playing a rock and roll song, if you're playing a Motown song, if you're playing a metal song, instead of trying to rip your hair out, forcing one drum to sound like another, and detuning it constantly and tuning it up again and changing the heads or whatever constantly, it's far easier to learn about the different essences of all of these drums and recognize and get involved in the culture of that as well, that if somebody says this song's a funk song in the style of James Brown, it's far easier to pull out the Superphonic than the wooden Pearl export. It's far easier. Yes, you can get it on the export. Yes, you can get it on the Tom Red badge that I have, the vintage one. Yes, you might be able to get it on the Vistalite that I have. Yes, on the Acrolite. But that's not the point. You're erasing the essence of that drum, forcing it into the Superphonic vibe, and you're going to struggle if you have to constantly change the tunings to get that sound. These drums, all of my drums, and I have them for that reason, their essence, their sound achieved easily is very different than all the other ones that I have. That's the point. Now, can I tell you which one I'm listening to in a blind test? When you get the tunings, when you do it as I do, where it's the lowest note and it's an easy tuning process, I probably could get a few of those guesses correct, but what I'd probably do more so is I'd probably be able to tell you if it was the ingredients of the drum. Probably not the mark, the company, but if it's aluminum, or if it's chrome plated or brass or wood, I'd probably have to ask you, play me a rim shot, play me a rim click. I'd probably ask you, compare one to another for me. Play number 1 and number 2, and I'll tell you which one has the chrome plated or which one is the wood one. But that's an argument, again, it's kind of a overdramatic, sensationalized, useless argument, because that's not what I'm thinking of when I'm in the studio recording. I don't care about that crap. I want the essence of a drum, and I want to get it easily, and so all of my drums are tuned up that way, and I don't have to rack my head apart to get a John Bonham sound from a piccolo drum. You know? That's the difference. They are important. Here's a few other little things that make that have an essence that's very, very strong on drums. The hoops. You try and get Elvin Jones' sound in his later years. You try and get that sound out of a superphonic. You're not going to get it. You won't get it. Superphonics are great, but you're not going to get an Elvin Jones sound. You won't do it. Let's try I mean, you could pick other stuff, but I'm thinking about rims right now. Steve Jordan, coincidentally, uses a drum that sounds very much like an Elvin Jones drum. Both have wooden hoops. Talking the later years of Elvin, and Steve Jordan currently right now tends to use the drum with wooden hoops. And they might even be the same sizes. Wooden hoops have an essence all by themselves. And they react and interact with the drum and the head in a particular way. And you're not going to be able to get any sound you want from that drum. The wooden hoop has a very distinct sound to it. You cannot just do a blind test and force it to sound like an acrolite. You probably, I don't even know how you could do that. And I'm not even, that would be such a waste of time, because I'd be sitting here telling myself, I have an Elvin Jones drum with wooden hoops and I'm making it sound like a John Bonham drum. Why the heck would I do that? Yes, I can do it, maybe, but why am I doing that? It's far easier to get the John Bonham drum. The subject, it goes right to the heart of how this world is today about a lot of stuff. Drives me crazy. There's a subtle remark, a subtle nuance that says drum is a drum is a drum, and it really is up to you. It's your responsibility to get that John Bonham sound. It's your responsibility to get that Elvin Jones sound or that Steve Jordan sound. And you need to sit down and tune your ears and listen to those recordings and learn how to play like Steve Jordan, and it doesn't really matter the snare drum that you have. That is completely wrong. That is a bunch of baloney. It does matter. Now, all of that stuff, tuning your ears, learning about the craft, the art form, all of that stuff absolutely matters. But then putting it in the same phrase right after, saying it doesn't matter, it's all about you, that's, it's like a double negative. Turning it into a moral lesson of it's really just your responsibility. That's how you're going to get that Steve Jordan sound. No, dude, it's not. There are specific ingredients that go into the beginning of getting that sound. Elvin Jones snare drum, case in point. John Bonham snare drum, case in point. You're not just going to get that sound easily on a Tom Red Badge vintage snare drum. You're not going to get that sound very easily. You're going to struggle to get it. And you're certainly going to be, confused. Why am I trying to force this drum into that drum when it has its own essence? But there's another thing here that in the conversation that's like of course you're going to feel good if I tell you that it doesn't matter what drum you're going to use. It's all about you because it's cheaper to do it that way. Doesn't matter. You can just get a basic good drum and it'll sound, you can get it to sound like however you want. And that makes me feel good because that means, the burden's off. I don't have to invest in a very expensive drum. So I just got to work on my skills. It's like a double negative again. Yeah, you got to work on your skills, but a part of that is recognizing that each of these drums have their essence and their being and their reason to be. And that's why John Bonham chose the drum he chose. That's why Steve Gadd chooses the drum he chooses. That's why Elvin Jones, Steve Jordan, all of these drummers have the drums that they prefer. Not because they can't get their sound out of another drum, but because the sound that they want, they can get easily out of that drum. That's the point. It does make a difference. Now, do you want to sit here and come back and say, it doesn't, and I'm just going to rack my head and tune it 3,000 different ways, depending on the song I'm playing with? I mean, fine, go ahead, do that. You're gonna drive yourself nuts. You know, drive yourself nuts. You know, it's an argument that really I get annoyed with, and I'm sure every single craftsman of drums was insulted with, you know, when they heard this, because they probably threw up their hands saying, well, why even make a difference between metal and wood and hoops and chrome? What's the difference? What, you know, we got people now coming out here saying it doesn't matter. It's up to you to do it. It's something through. Okay, fine, I get that. But there is a craft, right? There is a distinction between these things, and that's why the engineers that are making these drums do that. There's an essence to brass. There's an essence to copper. There's an essence to birch, maple, mahogany. You know, there's an essence to all of these drums. When you get into the drums beyond the snare drum, I mean, I have two Premier Janista kits. One's birch, the other one's maple. The maple kit, which is right here, that I play on all the time at home, this one, the essence in a tuning that's very easy to get, it sounds very different than the birch one. Can I make this one into the birch one? I guess so, but why would I do that? You know, the Tama Red Badge, I have a Tama Red Badge vintage Swingstar kit. Billy Cobham, Elvin Jones, they had the Imperial Star versions, I guess. Stuart Copeland, same kind of shell construction. Those drums sound amazing. They sound boxy. They sound punchy. There's a coating inside that is extremely durable against humidity. They were some of the most robust drums I've ever seen in my life. They sound a particular way, easily. I can get that sound easily with them. If I want to get that same sound with these Premier Maples, I'm going to have to muffle the insides of all of the shells to disrupt the vibration of the sound out of these drums. I'm not going to get the same boxiness, woodiness, not woodiness, punchiness out of these drums easily. And that's the difference. Easily, what sound do you get? Easily. This argument goes into all of the other instruments as well. What sound do you get easily? If I take my Paiste, I have a Paiste dry ride, signature dry ride, okay? Let's say it was a full ride. Can I get a dry ride sound out of it? Sure. I would I would either put tape on the bottom of the cymbal. I might use some cymbal harmonic paddings under the bell. I might even put some paint on it and just dry the crap out of it. Sure, I can do that. But why would I do that? The essence of it is the full ride sound, right? So I use that full ride in that situation. If it doesn't matter anymore, then what the heck is the reason to have all of this stuff? It's a part of the art. Learning about, the different ingredients of all of this thing called drums and cymbals. If it, yes, I can get that, but I'm not going to do that, because what happens when I want the full ride sound again? Well, then I got to take it all off. It's far easier to either get a cymbal that blends in, that's full, or that's like right down the line between the two, or just invest, save up, live with the patience and the hard work and the investment of getting stuff that makes your life easier in the long run, instead of constantly manipulating your drums and your cymbals beyond belief, depending on what song or recording or performance you're doing. It's far easier to understand the different ingredients in the craft. The same thing goes into the sticks you use. The reason why we have different sticks, it's not because you can't get a Steve Gadd sound out of a 2B. That's not the reason why. The reason why is you can get a Steve Gadd sound if you just get his sticks. You can get it faster than if you try and force it out of a 5B. So, man, it bothers me. It bothers me because it bothers me. Now, and I haven't even talked about the engineering recording part to this conversation, which is that you can get a Pearl Export snare drum and EQ the crap out of it and make it sound like a John Bonham deep shelled, superphonic. Yes, you can do it. But how do you do that? Mic choice. Effects choice, right? Maybe a room choice. Maybe you're going to do some muffling or not. See, there's a lot of other stuff that you have to do that matters to get that out of a Pearl Export snare drum. So those things do matter. If you're going to use a Pearl Export to get a John Bonham sound, fine. You might say, it doesn't matter, it's up to you how you play it. Okay, I understand a little bit of that. But on the engineering end, they're going to have to work their butt off to get that John Bonham sound out of a Pearl Export snare. They're going to have to use different effects. They're going to have to use different microphones. Whereas if you just use the Superphonic that he used, you got it. There it is. Case closed. And even if you play bad, you're still going to be very close to that sound. And I know that people are going to say, no, you're wrong. No, sorry. No, that is the case. If you use a Superphonic snare drum and tune it up to its essence, the shell size of John Bonham's drum, right? Not Clyde Stubblefield's. John Bonham used the deeper one. And let's say you are a beginner, so you don't know how to play, quote unquote, right? When you hit that drum, you're going to get a very good sound and not even know how to play that drum yet. Because the essence tuned properly, it's already wanting to be that sound, regardless of whether you're terrible or not. Ugh. You know, all of this, seeing this after I just got done confirming the fact from my yesterday night's gig that, yes, my Slingerland 140 model drum rocks the house. And it confirmed my recollection of it, having used it years ago, that it does matter. Last thing. I might be able to get, let's say I get a Pearl export, and I got nothing wrong with Pearl exports, so don't throw that at me. But let's say I get a Pearl export, same dimensions as the Superphonic John Bonham drum, right? And I'm playing it. And let's say I'm recording with it. The sound, the engineers are going to have to work their butts off to get that sound to sound like a Superphonic. They're going to have to do things differently. A different EQ, different mics, different placements, a lot of different stuff. I might even have to choose different heads, you know. I got to really think about the material and how to force it into that world. Okay. First of all, that doesn't feel good to me as a drummer, because now I'm playing something that doesn't want to sound like I'm making it sound. So you're forcing something. And when I hit it, that intention of forcing this drum into a place that it doesn't want to be is going to bother me when I play it. On an artistic level, it's going to bother me. That's going to inhibit how I play it. Beyond that, I'm going to notice a difference right here. Not over there. Not in the headphones. But right here, I'm going to notice a difference. So maybe 3 feet away, you don't see it or hear it. Or in the engineer's booth, you don't hear it. But me playing it, I'm going to feel and I'm going to hear a difference. That's a fact. The ring is going to be different. The pressure is going to be different. The rebound, the tonality, it's going to be different. You know, you can't tell me that because you don't hear a difference between wood and metal, that there is no difference. There is a difference. When I'm playing this drum here, I do hear a difference. You know, it's like the God subject. Just because you do or don't believe in God doesn't mean that I'm wrong if I do or don't believe in God and it's the opposite of you. You can't say that. That's not how this works. By doing that, you're erasing the other person's existence with that instrument. You know? So to tell me what I do and what I hear and what I don't hear, man, that's wrong. That's just wrong. I have my existence. I do notice a difference between metal and wood when I'm playing it. Now, if you want to blind test me, who knows? But that doesn't matter to me, because when I'm playing it, and I can see it, but I'm playing it, close my eyes and play it, meaning you're not playing it in another room, I'm actually on it right here and hitting it and playing it, I notice a difference. If that wasn't the case, why is this drum here, not the other one? Why am I choosing one drum over another? Because the essence, to get that sound easily, that's why. I can get, this is a 1026 Premier steel drum. The essence of this drum, I can get that, I can get the essence of it is beautiful. It's got a great ring. And I can achieve that sound very easily with this drum. Now, if I take my Rogers deep shell wood drum here and try and get this one from that one, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be very hard to do. Why would I do that? That one has its own sound, its own essence. I'm not going to force that one into this world. You know, it's the same thing with cymbals. You know, I hear the difference between B8 and B20. And I hear it so well now that I could pretty much do a blind test. Almost. I mean, it's 90%, 95% accuracy, because there are certain things that when you hear them, unless the engineer's EQing them out, when you hear them, you recognize immediately it's a B8. You can hear it. I guess you could call this one a rant. Let's close this up by saying how you play is very important. Being responsible is very important. Getting in tune with the drums you're playing is very important. Not disregarding the essence and the being of all of these instruments is also very important. It will facilitate your life and the sounds you're going for. So if you want a Metallica sound, can you get that out of a Vistalite drum? Sure. Is it going to be easy? No. If that's the road you want to go, more power to you. But I'm not doing that. And a lot of professional musicians don't do that. We save up, we invest, we learn about the drums that have that sound that we want easily. And we get them. More news soon. Thanks for watching. Ciao.